Ayato Imagiri, an ordinary transfer student with top-tier magic, arrives at an elite academy but pretends to be just another nobody. Unfortunately, his serious sister complex and habit of attracting trouble ruin any chance of staying off the radar. Within minutes of arriving, he accidentally ticks off one of the strongest duelists on campus, setting off a chain reaction that earns him way too much attention from enemies, the student council, and just about every dangerously powerful girl at the academy. On a peaceful day, Imagiri Ayato caught a napkin carried by the wind. As he figured out the origins of this napkin, he used his inversia to hand that napkin back to its owner Alexia, who was busy changing her clothes to get to school. Instead of acting naturally and pushing him off the window, Alexia asked him to just turn the other way. As Ayato thought that Alexia didn't even hear his reasoning about the napkin, he was surprised to learn that she heard him loud and clear, so he handed it to her, which made Alexia get emotional over it to the point she felt indebted to him. Or so Ayato believed, as Alexia attempted to blow him away. Literally, although surprised that he survived the attack, Alexia made it clear that she cannot overlook that Ayato had infiltrated the girls' dorm and spied on a maiden while undressing. Despite Ayato's constant explanations that he's a new student in the academy, Alexia was determined to solve this issue with him once and for all through a duel. To make matters worse for the lad, Ayato got handed a sword from the public who were eager to witness this fight taking place. Now that the rules got explained, the duel began in earnest. To the surprise of everyone, Ayato was managing to dodge Alexia's relentless attacks with relative ease. Despite that, Alexia was not done yet, as she unleashed an even more powerful attack in hope that Ayato wouldn't be able to make it out of it alive, only to see him breaking through it with his swordsmanship. Instead of taking down her badge, however, Ayato jumped at Alexia and pinned her on the ground. It didn't take long for the girl to realize the motives behind what Ayato just did, but she couldn't help but insist that Ayato get off her, especially after realizing that he's pressing on Mountain Fuji of hers. The public were outraged at this sight, especially Alexia's simps, but before this fight could escalate any further, the student council president Claudia came in to dismiss the entire spiel, especially that Ayato isn't a Seidouken Academy student as of yet. To his surprise, Claudia turned out to be in the same grade as Ayato, so she insisted that he be more casual around her, even though she cannot afford to act the same way towards him, as she admitted that she's a scheming psycho who would go to great lengths to even show how open-minded she is publicly to Ayato, before calling the whole act as a joke.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
Once they got to the student council office, Claudia used a hologram to take the new fella high up to the sky and tell him more about the other academies in Asterisk, such as Garrodworth, Alekant, Jai Long, Le Wolf Black, Queen Male Girls, and lastly Seidouken. These academies collect the best of the Genistella from all over the world to put them in fights once every year against each other in what's called festas, which is the reason that Asterisk exists. Since Seidouken's record in the past couple of years has been abysmal, Claudia encouraged Ayato to win them this year's festas. It all made sense to her when Ayato expressed his dire need to learn about his sister's presence in this school, as she had traces of an unknown female student already, which Ayato identified instantly as his sister Haruka. What was more concerning, however, was the presence of Sir Vereste in her possession, which is a notoriously dangerous weapon that belongs to Seidouken, and yet the remaining data on this weapon were collected from its most recent usage 5 years ago. As such, Claudia concluded that Haruka is best case scenario no longer in the academy, which was fine with, as he was there to figure out what to do with his own life in the first place. Since he's a transfer student, Ayato had the priority to pick any weapon he wanted from Seidouken's arsenal, including Sir Vestera. Until then, Ayato will have to use another sword instead. As for the transfer student paperwork part, Claudia got to hug Ayato for a moment, before revealing that he needs none and that she was lying about that, for he long was a perfect candidate for this academy, as well as that being a perfect ploy to pull him out of that duel. With all these issues addressed, Ayato got introduced by his homeroom teacher Kyoyuko Yatsuzaki to the rest of the class, including Alexia, who got worked up for being called as Ayato's partner in crime for obvious reasons. Once the day was over, Ayato tried to ease off the tensions between him and Alexia. In response, Alexia thanked Ayato for saving her earlier, but made it clear that she's not willing to consorting with him. As she took her leave from the classroom, Aishiru Yabuki pointed out for the new fella that that's Princess Alexia for ya, before proceeding to introduce himself. As they walked outside the classroom, Ayato learned from his new friend that Alexia is the crown princess of the fictional nation of Sultania, but the most important part of all is that she's one of the few Stregas in the Genistella. Despite that impressive background, no one is sure why Alexia is in this academy. The girl was aware of how much attention that she got to herself from the get-go, so she made sure to make everyone aware that she's no freak show to stare at. And to further enforce that, she got herself in countless duels to climb her way up to rank 5 in no time, and yet she became the aloof person that everyone knows of today. Once Ayato was done with returning the sword he borrowed to Yabuki and explaining how he could tell that that was his from the crowd, the boys noticed that Alexia is being surrounded by an insecure alpha wannabe student named Lester and his two goons Randy and Silas. And no, I'm not talking about the Silas from League of Legends, who were furious that Alexia went ahead to duel the newcomer, as Lester wanted to be the one to challenge her instead. He might be rank 9 in class and on page 1, but he got defeated 3 times by Alexia in all his duels against her, and yet he's insisting to go on another one. Alexia was not willing to fight him, but when Lester got her to drop her napkin on the floor and mock her reasoning for being in Seidouken, Lester is now about to get cooked. Literally, as he saw these developments taking place, Ayato was reminded of his older sister Haruka reminding him that his father forbade him to fight for his inability to control his powers. As such, she made it clear that he'll be allowed to fight once he figures out what he wants to do in his life. When young Ayato asked Haruka the same question about her purpose in life, she responded that she's supposed to fight in order to protect Ayato, so Ayato vowed to also fight to protect his sister. Before he knew it, Ayato realized that this was just a dream. As he went outside to start his morning routine with some exercising, Ayato remembered what happened yesterday in the park, where he jumped into the argument and nearly got himself beaten by Lester, who opted to pull back for the time being. Seeing this, Alexia couldn't help but be appalled by how gutsy Ayato was, hoping that this wasn't just a fluke, since Seidouken isn't a forgiving place. Ayato, on the other hand, was curious to know about Alexia's reasoning for being here, which turned out to be money. To get that, she has to conquer every festas in her way, which starts with Phoenix Festa. The only problem here is that Alexia has no partner to join the event with, for she has no friends in the first place, thus getting exposed as a sore loser, despite all her attempts to debunk this fact. Still, Alexia was hoping that her partner would at the very least have a page 1 level fighting skills, as well as some unrealistic royalty characteristics. Although Yabuki wanted to laugh some more at this so-called princess, his responsibilities require more attention to be paid instead. With him now out of the way, Ayato got the chance to finally see Alexia laughing for a bit, even if it was at his inability to remember the way to the boys' dorm. This brief moment of joy turned into utter disbelief when Ayato requested that Alexia take him around the academy and the city whenever she got time. But she relented when Ayato portrayed it as paying her debt to him saving her earlier that day. Back to present time, the entire class was taken aback when they saw Alexia saying hi back to Ayato, much to her annoyance.
Ohayo, Yurise. おはよう。挨拶を返しただと？私だって挨拶くらい返す。
Ayato, on the other hand, was surprised to see a familiar face around. His childhood friend Seiya, who had moved abroad 6 years ago. To her unexpressed surprise, Ayato failed to recognize that she had grown taller, even though she's as tall as a wide Putin. When asked about her dad, however, Seiya wished that he could take it easy on work, especially after sending her to school to promote for his newly made gun there.
ほほう、なるほどなるほど。
薄いな勘繰りはやめた方がいい。
Of course, that didn't mean that Seiya had her own reasons to join Seidouken, but she prefers to keep them as a secret. Fortunately for Yabuki, who's gotten threatened to be shot for having funny ideas, Professor Kyoyuko arrived to bring justice upon the young girl for skipping yesterday's class, even though I can't really blame her for being held as hostage by her bed. Once class was over, Alexia was done with preparing herself to take Ayato on a tour around the campus. Since he was hanging around with Seiya, the latter learned that Alexia made a promise to Ayato, albeit she couldn't tell what's behind that promise. As such, Seiya got into a needless squabble with Alexia over who should show Ayato around. When Ayato tried to calm things down between them, Claudia came in to suggest that she show Ayato around, in an exceedingly passionate way for Seiya and Julius as much as it was for Ayato. Seeing that neither of the girls wanted her to join the fun, Claudia got into business and informed Ayato that his test for weapon compatibility has been scheduled for tomorrow, so he needs to sign some papers. Seeing how talkative Alexia is around Claudia, Ayato began to wonder if the two are just friends, to which he got 2 different answers from them both, before Alexia and Seiya dismissed Claudia coldly. Back to the issue at hand, Ayato concluded that it's best that he have both Alexia and Seiya showing him around, to which they both agreed. While showing Ayato around, Alexia realized that Seiya struggled with directions. Not wanting a problem to take place, Ayato opted to take a break with the girls. When he went to get some drinks for them, Seiya took on the opportunity to learn more about what did Alexia owe Ayato, only to end up informing her about the true strength that Ayato possesses. Before this civilized discussion could turn into a chaotic brawl, Alexia got attacked by the same assassin as yesterday. This time she took notice of that assassin, so she retaliated back, only for her attack to be repelled by another assassin. What these edgelords didn't predict, however, was that their asses will be blasted by a short queen. I mean Seiya. By the time Alexia called the attack off, Ayato came back. He was shocked by the carnage that took place, but he was even more shocked by how revealing Alexia and Saya were after being soaked wet. Claudia heard of what just happened and learned more about it from Ayato the next day. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to get any clue on the perpetrators' identities, and Alexia, being Alexia, did complicate the issue by refusing to cooperate with the campus security. Before Ayato could figure out what Alexia was being so protective about, he was informed that he arrived at the Orge Lux testing ground, where he saw that Lester and Silas were there too to take this test. As Claudia explained the Orge Lux renting procedure, Ayato realized that Lester had picked Sir Vestra, but would he be able to be compatible with this weapon? Absolutely not. No matter how hard he tried to get the weapon to accept him by force, Lester was not able to persuade Sir Vestra to accept him. In fact, the more he tried, the more his compatibility rate dropped until it reached negative levels. The situation now became so dangerous that Sir Vestra pointed itself towards Ayato and began to attack him left and right as he approached, until Ayato managed to skillfully catch the weapon and force his will upon it, albeit with a small scratch on the back of his hand, thus achieving a staggering 97% compatibility rate with it. That night, Ayato obliged to a small favor that Claudia asked of him, which was to be at her place that night. As he came in oblivious to what's gonna happen, Ayato found himself in front of Claudia wearing a bath cape. Aside from this obscene sight he found himself in front of, Ayato was surprised to learn that he can get a huge private room as this through hard work and constant grinding. As she did talk about that, she kept on trying to culturally provoke her guest, before proceeding to get down to business, where Claudia informed the guy about the students that entered the next Phoenix Festa then withdrew due to injuries, although she has no clue that these participants have been attacked, and that there's no clue about the people that tried to attack Alexia. The disciplinary committee is still strongly suspicious against Lester and Randy for having no alibi for the time of the attack yesterday. Yet again, there's no proof that supports these suspicions, thus making the disciplinary committee's hands tied up. Still, the committee now knows that the next target of this attacker will be Alexia, and to make sure they get caught, Claudia asked Ayato to stay by Alexia's side, since she seems to be comfortable around him. As for why Claudia is concerned about Alexia's safety, Claudia answered that that's her duty not only towards her specifically, but towards every single student in the academy. That being said, Claudia wasn't willing to ask for a favor without giving a reward to Ayato.
Yeah, boy.
Which for the greater good, Ayato promptly declined and took his leave instantly. The next morning, Alexia couldn't help but panic at every compliment Ayato gave her, before proceeding to show him around the city, where she told him about the different stages in Asterisk, until they decided to take a break for lunch at WC Donade. Anyway, Ayato was surprised to see a princess sitting in public and having a burger, as well as having actual friends from her home country. Once he confirmed that his biases were baseless, Ayato brought up the threats she's exposed to and that Claudia suggested he keep her company as a security measure. Just as Alexia expressed her refusal to let anyone help her, Lester and his goons appeared to insist that Alexia duels him once again, only for Alexia to refuse yet again. This made Lester get vocal about his will to fight her, and went as far as to physically threaten Ayato, who pointed out that he'll be suspected of being the one that tried to attack Alexia for the past 2 days, but he had to retreat when Silas alarmed him to the gravity of the situation he'll be in. Deep down, Alexia was impressed by Ayato's unyielding mind. She almost slipped off her usual attitude, but managed to restrain herself by showing off how prideful a person she is. As they walked outside the woods, the two ran into students from the Wolf Academy, who got Alexia and Ayato surrounded, and thus vulnerable for any accidental injuries. Since she was familiar with their petty tactics, Alexia managed to single-handedly beat these thugs and extract informations out of them. Apparently they were paid by some tall blurry man in black to hurt Alexia, who happened to be hiding in the woods as we speak. Not wanting to miss on the opportunity to catch her attacker, Alexia went ahead on a Naruto running campaign after the perpetrator, with Ayato on her back to make sure she's safe, only for the two to get attacked from all directions. Fortunately, neither got injured, but Ayato got the core of his sword destroyed to protect himself. After making sure that they're both safe, Alexia thought that it'd be best to spend some more time with Ayato. That time would be spent that night, where Ayato hopped in Alexia's room, and in case you're wondering if things couldn't get any worse, Alexia asked Ayato to strip. Before your imagination could run wild, Alexia wanted to sew his clothes to repay the favor of saving her once again. As she did that, Ayato took the freedom to look around the room, where he took interest in a picture she had with her friends from her childhood. Although upset by this absurd behavior, Alexia revealed that she was a tomboy when she was a child, who often ran out of the palace she lived in. She found herself lost in an alley where she was about to be beaten by thugs, only to end up being saved by those same girls from the palace. Since then, Alexia learned that these girls have come originally from the slums to the same orphanage as herself, and despite not telling any of them about herself being a princess, Alexia knew that the nuns there did know. Still, that didn't stop her from escaping the orphanage to see what they've been doing. As for the orphanage itself, it was constructed by Alexia's mother, but since she passed away, it became increasingly difficult to keep that orphanage running every year for the lack of funds. As such, Alexia took the decision to enter the academy to secure funds for this orphanage to keep running. Although she's a princess, she couldn't secure funds in a quasi-independent kingdom, even if it was for a welfare project, since it won't have any revenues. Left with no other choice, Alexia decided to join this dirty world where students are put to fight against each other like chicken gambles. But despite all the corruption and hedonism that is taking over the city, Asterisk is still the city of all desires. Once she was done with explaining her reason for joining the academy, Alexia finished fixing Ayato's clothes, but before he could take his leave, he couldn't help but wonder about the origins of that napkin, which turned out to be a birthday gift from her friends at the orphanage from years ago. The next morning, Ayato concluded that Alexia got back to her old habit of ignoring others, especially after reading a letter this morning. As he was concerned about that, Claudia came into the scene to learn about what's going on with Alexia. Only then they realized that Alexia must have received a letter from an opponent, and now she's heading there as they speak. Ayato thought that he failed to win Alexia's trust, but Claudia assured him that Alexia was worried about his safety, which is why she decided to go alone. That statement reminded him of his older sister's promise to protect him, so he decided to rush after her immediately. Claudia, on the other hand, backed him up and gave him Sir Vestera. Now Ayato is in a race against time to save Alexia. Once she got inside an abandoned building, Alexia repelled a sneak attack, before revealing that the one behind the attacks was none other than Silas. Indeed, Alexia did figure that out after what he told Lester to stop him from provoking her, and perhaps Ayato's own provocation of Lester was the catalyst that revealed the entire scheme. By the time Silas began to mention his deal with Alexia to have her to bail out of Phoenix Festa in exchange for the safety of Ayato, Lester arrived in a fury as he heard the entire story taking place. To make matters worse, Lester learned that Silas has been doing this dirty work on behalf of someone else, and hearing his excuses that everyone in the academy are nothing but enemies further infuriated the big guy. Before he could get to land a strike against the Weasley traitor, a man in black cloak arrived to repel Lester's attack, followed up by two more precious little dolls of Silas. Indeed, these dolls were actual dolls that stood helpless in front of Lester's signature move. Or so Lester thought, as these dolls got back to moving again. He tried to charge at them, only to find himself being shot by two other dolls in hiding. With more heat-enduring dolls surrounding Alexia now, and Lester being practically unable to fight, the situation seems to become abysmal for the two, especially that they're standing alone against 128 dolls. Alexia fought heroically against these dolls, but their sheer numbers and their ability to outstand heat, and even piercing attacks, Alexia ended up pinned against the wall. To Silas's surprise, Alexia figured that Alekant were the ones that were pulling the strings from behind, since they were the only ones capable of mass-producing these dolls. But before they could deliver the coup de grace against Alexia, Ayato arrived just in time for the rescue. Once they're in relative safety, Alexia was upset that Ayato is getting himself in business that he has nothing to do with. Ayato, however, pointed out that Alexia deserves to be protected, just like how she's protecting others, which is why he wants to be by her side. Before Alexia could say a word, Silas arrived with his army of dolls and went ahead with his attacks, only to find all of his attacking robots instantly wiped out. Despite that, Silas was not done yet, as he summoned what's left of his merciless army to finish off Ayato and Alexia. The dolls attacked relentlessly, and yet Ayato kept on dodging all of their attacks with relative ease, before exposing what tricks Silas has been using to manipulate the dolls. Frustrated by this revelation, Silas ordered the machines to attack instantly, only to bear witness to their devastating destruction. In a last-ditch effort to turn the table, Silas summoned the Queen of Ugandan Knuckles. Dolls, hoping to use its side to overpower Ayato, except that he completely overlooked the old saying the bigger they are the harder they fall, and so the doll did fall way too hard that it forced Silas to flee the scene. Not wanting to let this opportunity to decisively solve this issue slip away, Alexia decided to assist Ayato by helping him fly, which is exactly what they did. To make matters worse for Silas, Claudia and the rest of the disciplinary committee were waiting for him on the ground to deal with him legally. Although this issue was now over, Ayato began to suffocate from the aura he got from his Sir Vestera, except that it's even more intense than how it was at his first encounter with the Orge Lux. Or so it seemed, because those shackles that suffocated Ayato were a curse casted upon him by his sister Haruka when he was a child to lock his powers up, before bidding him farewell. When he woke up, he found himself in your average male's bliss, with Alexia being relieved that he's safe. She did take notice of the curse he had, which got her to learn that it was his sister's doing. Unfortunately for her, she didn't know about Haruka's reason to restrain her brother's power, since Mr. Oblivious had no idea either. Aside from that, Ayato and Alexia came to the conclusion to enter Phoenix Festa together after a brief back and forth that got Alexia to turn red. And no, I don't mean that Alexia is becoming communist. Although Alexia and Ayato were having a serene time, Silas was busy running for his life, only to end up being attacked by Claudia, who turned out to be scheming with Yabuki to get Alekant to owe them a favor by extracting as much information out of him as possible. What they didn't know, or what they disregarded, was the fact that they've been under surveillance by two girls who worked for Alekant apparently. The next morning in Hotel Elnaf, Claudia joined the meeting with the other student council presidents from other academies in Asterisk, such as Dirk from the Wolf Black, Shuma from Alekant, Fan Shinlu from Jailong, and Ernest from Garrardworth. The only one missing was Sylvia from Queenvale, who was, according to Claudia, touring around Europe like a diva. Before things could turn nasty between Ernest and Dirk over their different opinions towards Sylvia, Shinlu concluded the argument by changing topics before threatening to join the fray. Only then Dirk got to ask Claudia about the deal she struck with Alekant to co-develop a new type of Lux, which Claudia explained that it was an official cooperation between the two academies as equals. But when Shinlu began to wonder about the reason why Seidoken had to mobilize the Shadow Stars, Claudia decided to dismiss the topic, while Ernest thought it'd be best to get started with the meeting, only for Shuma to discuss the handling of artificial intelligence in Asterisk, including Festus. Elsewhere, Ayato was hurrying up to not get on Alexia's nerves when he accidentally ran into Taudu Kirin. After recklessly finding himself looking into the Mariana Trench, Ayato apologized for his carelessness, then proceeded to take a tiny piece of wood off her hair before Kirin excused herself to get to her angry professor. As for Mr. Airhead, he remembered that Alexia is now on the verge of turning him into a smoked steak. Indeed, she tried to do that by beating him with her skills and training. But Ayato managed to prove his mettle, even when Alexia thought she caught him with his pants down, only to find herself utterly defeated. Although impressed by his skills, Alexia was worried about the possibility that Ayato might use his full power too often at the festa, especially after he passed out yesterday. Ayato, on the other hand, was certain that he wouldn't resort to such measure, since most participants are nowhere close to being up to par with Alexia's skills. Although pleased to hear that, Alexia was concerned that people like Ernest and Shunli. On the same note, Ayato brought up the fact that he heard about a beast of a fighter called Ophelia, which did bring some traumatic memories to Alexia for a second, before brushing it off to stay focused on themselves instead. After all, Alexia was confident that Ayato's skills are not widely known if anything, so that should serve to their advantage, even if the fact that he's wielding the Servestra is now public knowledge. Alexia made sure she tells Ayato that he shouldn't get himself in any needless duels, which is absolutely not a foreshadowing of what was to come. A while later, Alexia and Ayato found themselves meeting up with Lester and Seiya, where the latter was upset that Alexia is stealing her man from her, as well as accusing her of other things that men of cultures like you and I know about, which got Alexia to react. On the other hand, Ayato was relieved to learn that Lester made a full recovery after that incident, as well as partnering up with Seiya for the incoming festa, while Lester came in to thank Ayato properly for saving him from that incident with Silas. Simultaneously, Claudia arrived with Camilla and Ernesta from Alekant to inform them about the new deal that the two academies have struck to develop a new type of Lux in return for, according to Alexia, charging Alekant with the Silas incident. Claudia and her guests, however, denied this reasoning, as Ernesta claimed that she insisted she sees Seidoken Academy personally. Her excitement over Ayato's deeds during the Silas incident triggered Alexia and Seiya, but that didn't stop her from whispering in his ear that things won't go well next time, before turning both Alexia and Seiya from being uneasy around her to outright hostile after kissing Ayato on the cheek. Seeing this display of absurd behavior, Camilla took the role of a parent who's embarrassed by their mid-child saying hi, before taking interest in Seiya's gun, since she's American. This interest didn't last long, or it didn't even last for a few seconds, before Camilla began roasting Seiya for owning such a piece of junk that got outdated 10 years ago. When she learned that Seiya is the daughter of Professor Sasamiya, she roasted her even more and refused to apologize, since he was cast aside from Alekant and Ferrovia's faction. When Seiya insisted she get an apology, Ernesta came in to mention that the only way to force Camilla to do so would be through the upcoming Phoenix Festa. Now that the guests are gone, Seiya declared her race in Detra in Phoenix Festa, as well as her desire to join it with Ayato, which went as you might expect. Once they're outside the training facility, Ernesta became even more interested in pulling other stunts in order to achieve her own dream. The next morning, Ayato got to take a lesson from Yabuki about the different groups that exist in Alekant, their characteristics, and the challenges they face, before finding himself seeing Kirin being about to get slapped by her uncle Koakairo Taudu, who I mistook earlier as her teacher. Being the man with the infinite aura that he is, Ayato came in to defend the young girl, and not even the thought that he's involving himself in family matters could dissuade him from portraying himself as a Chad. After seeing how much of a big shot Ayato is to hold Sir Vestra, Koakiro decided to comply with never hurting Kirin. Oh, don't get your hopes up, because Koakiro put up Ayato in an imminent duel with Kirin in order for him to honor his promise. Left with no other option, Kirin obliged, with Ayato reluctantly accepting to duel Kirin. By the time they got fully committed to this duel, Alexia arrived to bear witness to her boy getting himself in an unnecessary duel. What surprised her the most was that although this duel has been going for a while, and that Ayato is capable of reading offensive and defensive movements of his opponents, the duel remains indecisive. With the time of his curse taking effect drawing near, Ayato decided to go for broke, which got him in the end to lose the duel. Although this ended well for Kirin, Ayato now needs to explain to Alexia why he got himself to fight with the best dueler in Seidoken. In fact, Kirin had to follow the lead of her uncle to get to rank 1, even though it came at the cost of her own self-esteem. Now that Ayato and Alexia were alone, Ayato expected himself to be yelled at by Alexia, only for the latter to be actually proud of him for standing by Kirin's side against her abusive uncle. Still, she couldn't help but mention that she's mad at him for merely losing this duel, as she thought that Ayato would be the only person to actually stand a chance against Kirin, who's actually 13. Other than Kirin, Alexia is unable to defeat 2 other people at her current level, namely Claudia and Ayato. Although she doesn't seem like it, Claudia is actually the rank 2 in Seidoken, thanks to her foresight. What makes Kirin rank 1, however, would be the fact that she doesn't use an Orange Lux. Now that Ayato's abilities are now public knowledge, Alexia opted to redo their game plan from scratch, once he gets his new school badge that is. Now that he was done with his meeting with Alexia, Ayato had to meet Claudia to get a new school emblem, at the school's pool, where she had the most revealing attire. Once she gave him what he asked for, Claudia brought up his duel with Kirin, as well as the fact that she knew that Koakiro was the one behind that. After all, Koakiro is known to be a troublemaker employee of Seidoken Academy's parent company, who thanks to his connections and status, became virtually untouchable. To ensure that he gets a spot on the executive board, he decided to invest into his niece with everything he got. For her part, Claudia believes that Kirin has no agenda of her own, and that her uncle will very likely fail to get the luxurious position due to having self-interest. As for how Claudia knows that much, it was because her own mother had gone through hell and forth to get there. Once he's out of the pool, Ayato thought of an answer of what he should be doing about Kirin, when he actually ran into her. In fact, Kirin came in to thank him for giving her a hand to ease her uncle's rough treatment of her. Before Ayato could respond to that properly, he had to make sure he dealt with Yabuki, and the boys that were eavesdropping on them, which made him decide to have a good discussion with the young girl while walking. As they did, he couldn't help but get to talk to Kirin about her family's history and swordsmanship. In return, Kirin figured that Ayato is using some sort of ancient swordsmanship too based on his movements and stances. Before long, Kirin finally became at ease after learning that Ayato is interested in Kenjutsu, since that's the only thing that she's good at, before proceeding to give herself an L after the other. When asked about what she's fighting for, Kirin answered that it's to save her father. It is unclear what happened to him, but I bet he got himself lost on his way to get the milk. Still, in order to achieve her goal, she agreed to get help from her uncle, even if his treatment and discipline was way too harsh, which turned out to be caused by his hatred for Genestella. Despite that, Ayato was kind enough to discuss if she's interested in joining him in his early morning training, thus making Kirin leave happily after taking his offer. Things were not over yet for Ayato though, as he got jump scared by Seiya, who proceeded to choke him to know who that girl was, until she realized that she's choking the poor fella a tad too hard. Aside from this overzealous show of affection, or whatever you want to call it, Seiya was actually looking for Ayato to hear his answer about being her tag partner for the upcoming Phoenix Festa, only to hear that Ayato is still going at it with Alexia. Seiya also learned that the girl that was hanging around with Ayato earlier was none other than Kirin Taudu, which made her feel jealous, but for all the wrong reasons. To lift up her spirit, Ayato mentioned that Kirin joined the academy to help her father, just like Seiya. The next morning, Alexia rushed to the school restaurant to learn about what happened between him and Kirin yesterday, only to find herself accidentally ordering a plate of spicy curry to eat it on the same table as Ayato, who assured her that they've been training and sparring together early in the morning since they met yesterday. Although she claimed that she wasn't bothered by that, Alexia was actually so bothered that she went ahead with eating her over-the-top spicy curry, despite Ayato's warnings. Seeing that she's clearly unable to take another bite, Ayato was kind enough to suggest they trade plates, since his curry is less spicy than hers, to which Alexia reluctantly agreed. She was pleased with how delicious her new plate tasted. But Ayato ended up on the verge of singing big enough after realizing how hot the food was. Elsewhere, Camilla went to wake Ernesta from her slumber to tell her that the Tenorio guys are on the move, only to find out that Ernesta was aware of that already, and now she's about to get to track them down. As she did, she took notice of Kirin training alongside Ayato early in the morning. Unfortunately for Camilla, the time to pull her magnum opus against them has not come yet, so she has to wait until the opportunity finally presents itself. For now, Ayato couldn't help but tease Kirin about the possibility that she might lose her track in this fog, before the two took notice that a threat is coming, especially after getting to a dead end. Surrounded and outnumbered, Ayato and Kirin made an obvious choice. When Ayato tried to repel the monster's attack, he realized that they could resurrect their lost limbs time and again. Seeing this, Kirin opted to keep on cutting the monsters while resurrecting until she could destroy their core, which made the rest of the monsters flee. By the time Ayato figured that this monster must have been created by a Lekant, he and Kirin got attacked once again, leaving the ground to crumble underneath Ayato. Kirin tried to pull him up, only for herself to slip inside the pit alongside Ayato. Seeing this from their monitor, Camilla and Ernesta decided to move to Act 2 of their operation. Fortunately for Ayato and Kirin, for now, they landed in safety for a few seconds as they got attacked by a massive lizard from underwater. Ayato managed to repel the first attack of the dragon, but they're still stuck in a paralyzed situation. As such, Kirin suggested that Ayato let go of her, as she no longer wants for others to pay the price of herself being a burden. But Ayato refused, as he assured her that everything's fine. The next thing he did was pulling out his Survestra to create somewhere for himself and Kirin to stand on, before planning their next move against this seemingly unkillable behemoth, which led him to use all of his prana on his weapon to expand it and destroy the monster and its core altogether, but it did come at the cost of triggering his curse. It was a while later that Kirin learned about Ayato's limitations, as well as his reason to fight, which made her interpret that Ayato is in love with Alexia, even though the guy denied that. The most important thing for her now, however, was that the rescue squad is taking a long time to save them. On the other hand, Ayato got the opportunity to learn more about what led her father to get into prison, her regrets, and the extreme measures she took to get stronger. Ayato disagreed with her, as he made it clear that she'll feel burnt out if she keeps on working with her current motto. Ayato also assured her that there will always be people by her side to ensure that she gets closer to achieving her goal. Before any more could be said, the two realized that they're staring at each other in their undies, so they got back to their senses. For like a second, as the rescue squad arrived a moment later. Later that day, Kirin reunited with her uncle, where she was saddened to learn that he was more worried about Kirin Taudu as a tool to achieve his own goals. When Kirin refused to oblige to her uncle's order to distance herself from Ayato, Koakairo slapped her, and got even more upset when she stood in utter defiance, as he began to remind her that she's nothing without him, before trying to punch her, only to find that Kirin wasn't bluffing, as she decided to take a duel of her own from this point on, for better or worse. If you thought that she's going to duel Ayato, then allow me to tell you that you're absolutely correct. For Kirin, dueling Ayato is her first step to carve her very own path. From afar, Alexia, Lester, Claudia, Seiya, and Yabuki were watching this duel as well. Despite Alexia's concerns that Ayato might lose, Seiya assured her that he had won against even stronger opponents than Kirin, namely his older sister Haruka. Lester also revealed that Ayato asked him to lend him a Lux, so he figured he must have a plan. With that out of the way, the duel began in earnest, where Ayato kept on dodging Kirin's attacks skillfully. As both sides were excited at the knowledge of the new patterns of skills they revealed, both sides decided to go all out now, except that Ayato began to have the upper hand for the first time thanks to the variety of skills he had, including hand-to-hand combat, which ultimately got him the win. As Ayato rested with both Alexia and Seiya, Claudia came in with a surprise guest, namely Kirin, who wanted to join Alexia and Ayato in their training sessions. As much as she was surprised that Ayato never told her about this news, she was also reluctant to accept that, so much so that she got into another needless argument with Seiya. Before Ayato could agree to Kirin joining their training, Koakairo began to knock on the door aggressively to enter the room. Kirin allowed him in, only for Koakairo to raise his arm against her. Naturally, Ayato came into her defense once again, but Koakairo began to threaten to smear Kirin's reputation all over the academy. This time, Claudia decided to step in by outright threatening to undermine all his efforts to get into the Integrated Enterprise Foundation. Hearing this, Koakairo left the scene without saying a word. And yet, Kirin insisted that she's still thankful to all his efforts to get her to where she is now. Once Koakairo left and Ayato agreed to let her join his practice sessions, Kirin asked him for two favors, which evolved around calling each other by their first names, to which Ayato agreed. Elsewhere, Camilla and Ernesta were monitoring how one of their robots had obliterated two Genestellas. Ernesta also revealed that she managed to get some information about Ayato's strengths, thus making Camilla impressed by how they managed to hit two birds with one stone, and making sure that her two robots, namely RD and RMC, were ready for the upcoming festa. Back at Seidoken, Kirin began her training with Seiya, where despite their best efforts, they still failed to get anywhere close to Ayato and Alexia's scores. At the Academy's cafeteria, Ayato was surprised to see a girl giving him him the celebrity treatment by asking him for an autograph. Of course, Alexia and Seiya didn't take that kindly, as they thought that that will be problematic for a chick magnet like him. But it makes sense why he got that much attention after rising from being an obscure and unknown unranked student to the rank 1 fighter in Seidoken in one swoop. According to Yabuki, even Alexia's rise to prominence was just as sensational for her as it was for Ayato and Kirin, so much so that she went as far as to shut herself off from talking to anyone until she met with Ayato. To prove her point, she presented to Ayato that his autograph is now being auctioned. Aside from Seiya and Kirin's attempts to portray themselves as Ayato's fans too, it was of greater importance to stay aware of the challenges that awaits them in the upcoming event. Especially Seiya, who's still eager to avenge her father's name by defeating Camilla. Therefore, Seiya decided to join the event with Kirin as her tag partner, a fact that Alexia couldn't help but make a comment at how the two of them teamed up, only for Seiya to mock Alexia for the way she did with Ayato before. Ayato tried to mention what Seiya's team lacked, which made the latter conclude that she'll be skipping training tomorrow in order to socialize more with Kirin. Ironically, Seiya had no clue over what to do to socialize, as she's not a social person to begin with, and neither is Kirin, to her surprise. After giving it a little thought, the two opted to go shopping together, which is definitely not because Seiya isn't the female version of Zoro from One Piece in this anime. Since her father's birthday is coming up, Seiya thought it'd be a good idea to get him a present, which is why Kirin was also eager to help. Problem is, Seiya's father does not wear neckties, does not drink, and has no favorite food in particular. To get an idea on how to help exactly, Kirin sat down in the park with Seiya and asked her to tell her more about her own father, to which Seiya responded that her father is a mad scientist who gifted her guns every year since she was a young kid. Suddenly, Seiya asked Kirin to help her get to a certain destination. It was only after walking through narrow dangerous streets such as those in downtown Detroit that Kirin figured that they reached a gun shop that sells used weapons and illegal goods. After picking up her weapon of choice, Seiya was visibly smiling for the first time in the show, as the weapon she got is similar to her father's research and goals. Now that Seiya got what she wanted, it's time that Seiya helped out Kirin in getting what she wanted, which after a bit of thought, Kirin decided to ask Seiya to teach her how to swim, because she wanted Ayato to see her in a more favorable light. For her part, Seiya couldn't help but respect Kirin for her determination to become better, as she assured Kirin that Ayato will definitely see her in a good light as long as she keeps on doing her best, before Seiya going to get some drinks for herself and for Kirin. While Seiya was away, Kirin obliged her request to keep on training on her own, until she bumped into a girl called Violet that was laying on water. Despite her countless apologies, Violet remained furious so much that she challenged Kirin to a duel, before figuring out who she is. It was only then that Violet tuned down the brutality of her tone to Kirin, until she learned that the latter was merely trying to learn how to swim. Only then Violet got back to insulting Kirin for her inability to swim, before asking her to go splish splash in some corner of the pool. Before she could say another word, she got attacked by Seiya from afar for being disrespectful to her friend. Despite being unranked, Seiya wasn't as apologetic as her partner. If anything, Seiya was eager to put this arrogantly revealing Violet in her place regardless of the difference in their status. As such, she agreed to duel her. This duel ended as fast as it started, where Seiya blasted Violet away before the latter could even pull out her weapon, thus winning the duel without a sweat. Later that day, Seiya taught Kirin to always stand for herself and to not let the likes of Violet to ever scorn her like that ever again. In order to do that, Seiya made it clear that Kirin needs to have some sense of pride. Although Kirin was glad to hear that, she was even happier to learn that Seiya picked her as her tag partner for her talent, strategic compatibility, sense of purpose, and most importantly, wielding the same sword as Ayato. Lastly, Seiya requested that they call each other by their first name, to which Kirin agreed. The next day, their performance and training left Alexia and Ayato speechless, as their improvement was not one that could be achieved in a day. Not only Seiya and Kirin were happy about their bonding. In fact, Claudia revealed to Yabuki that she's also happy that there's a lot of participants in the upcoming festa. More importantly for them, Alexia and Ayato were lucky enough to make a run for the finals, thanks to being placed in a favorable block. Although Yabuki was optimistic for this turn of events, Claudia wasn't on the same page, since there's a potential rival faction for them in this festa called Arlequin from La Wolf, who's led by Irene Uzes, who Claudia wishes that Seidoken players could avoid facing her. In fact, it was Dirk and Corona, yeah that's the girl's name, it was them that went as far as to get to the detention room of La Wolf Academy to convince Irene to participate in the Phoenix Festa for the sole purpose of taking down Ayato. Dirk did not care if Irene won the festa or not, as long as she could get him rid of Ayato and his Sir Vestera. For her part, Irene agreed to participate, after confirming that Dirk didn't do anything funny to her sister, thus getting her freedom, for now. Finally, the long-awaited festa began after a good opening ceremony, where the steering committee welcomed all the participants and wished them all the best of luck. Truth of the matter, Madiath, the chairman of the committee, got to where he is after requesting to do so after winning a major festa, so despite his appealing personality, he's a tough guy that took notice of Ayato from all the participants. Aside from that, Madiath informed the participants that there will be some restrictions added for this festa on autonomous weapons, while allowing alternates to enter instead, much to Seiya's frustrations, hoping that this will surely lead to a more sophisticated festa. Now that this ceremony was over, Ayato and Alexia got to their venue. When they were about to head to have lunch, Ayato found Lester and Randy and invited them to lunch, only for Lester to not only decline the offer, but to make it clear that Ayato must not lose to anyone before getting to fight them. Before Ayato could make any reaction, he got a Seiya jump scare, followed up by Kirin, who was carrying lunch with her. In fact, it was Seiya that taught Kirin how to cook so she would make this lunchbox for Ayato, much to the surprise of Alexia. Not wanting to let Kirin get all the praise to herself, Seiya revealed that she also made bigger rice balls than Kirin's, who believed that the bigger the better. Come to think of it, Seiya isn't just American at heart, but a Texan to be more specific. She still insisted that Ayato pat her head though. By the time everyone finished eating their lunch, and Seiya became as full as a 9-month pregnant woman from how much she ate, Ayato realized that it's about time the first match start, which was going to be commented on by Miko Yanes and Pham Thai Tram, who introduced everyone to the schedule and rules of this festa. Ayato and his Alexia, on the other hand, knew who their opponents would be, and promised that he'll do everything he could to win. Their first match was the second of the day in this entire tournament, and the public were very much looking forward to seeing how they'll be performing in this festa. Indeed, Ayato was not willing to hold back in his first match, that he single-handedly won the round on his own just as fast as the round started, thus leaving the public and commentators like in awe of what they've just witnessed. On the other hand, Ayato and Alexia were satisfied that they kept their teamwork pattern, and Ayato's all-out limitations hidden from the public, but they still had to deal with the interviews that are just ahead of them. Once they were done with that, the duo were surprised to see that Yabuki had come to their venue, not to cheer them up per se, but to inform them about match 3, which will be against Elekant. Unfortunately for Seiya, she couldn't learn much about that, for Elekant shut down Yabuki from the get-go, to which Alexia figured that he was after contestants' passes. They did not have to wait long, as Elekant sent both RD and RMC, Ek, Aldi and Rimsey respectively, against 2 participants from La Wolf. To their surprise, Aldi gave them 1 minute to attack him as they pleased, only to be attacked by Rimsey for his display of idiocy before deciding to follow suit with what Aldi vowed. The La Wolf participants agreed to take on their deal. Despite their best efforts to land any hit on their opponents, the two failed at that ultimately. Now it's time for Aldi and Rimsey to make their move, which left Seiya, just like everyone else, in awe at this show of force by both Camilla and Ernesta. Seiya in particular began to realize the problem that she'll find herself in if she was. To top it off, her father Suikairu contacted her vocally to express how impressed he was by these 2 puppets, before greeting Ayato and asking his daughter if she received the newest gun he made for her. Although Seiya didn't receive it yet, Suikairu remained confident that Seiya can win as long as she's using any of his weapons. As Seiya and Kirin went to customs, and Yabuki to the press conference, Ayato and Alexia decided to take this opportunity to train. Ernesta, on the other hand, was proud of the victory that her puppets got, before finding herself easing off tensions between Aldi and Rimsey. When Aldi began to wonder why Rimsey is capable of beating him off easily despite both of them being programmed to have the same strength, Ernesta answered that that's in women's nature. What Ernesta didn't tell him, however, is the fact that Rimsey is his limiter. Once Ayato and the princess were done with their training, they rushed to get to watch the next match. By the time Ayato realized that they wouldn't be able to do so, they saw a scuffle taking place on the other side of the street, so they decided to be a little nosy about it. It turned out that Irene was the one that's causing this mayhem. Before she knew it, she found Ayato in front of her. Julius came in her way, so she decided to pull out her Orge Lux. Before she could make a move, Irene's personality flipped when her sister Priscilla arrived to lecture her about the importance of not getting into trouble, before apologizing to Ayato and Alexia for her sister's mistakes, while forcing Irene to follow suit. Now that the siblings left the scene, Alexia remembered that Claudia sent her some informations concerning Priscilla, which says that there's not much about her to begin with. As for why she provoked Irene, Alexia didn't appreciate Ayato being approached by her, especially that she knew that La Wolf was definitely plotting something. Before she could think of what they are after, Ayato alarmed her that Seiya and Kirin's match had just begun. Understandably, Seiya was mad that Ayato isn't there to watch her, despite Kirin's assurances that he's on his way. More importantly, Seiya had to focus on her match for the time being, where despite hers and Kirin's opponents' best efforts, Seiya and Kirin still emerged victorious. Naturally, the duo thought that they enjoyed a well-deserved shower after this match, except that Seiya had another game that she wanted to play with Kirin, which God forbid if I'll ever talk about that. To add more fuel to the fire, Seiya allowed Ayato and Alexia to come in, despite having absolutely nothing to cover their bodies. On day 5 of the tournament, Alexia were eager to be the one to fight alone this time against Yanon and Yasuga from Queenvale Academy. As for the aftermath of the match, it was only to be guessed at. When it came to what to do after this match, the duo went through a little back and forth, before settling down on having lunch. A lunch that Alexia brought up with her to be more specific, which tasted good to Ayato, much to her delight. Ironically, even Alexia got jealous of Seiya and Kieran getting pats for being good girls, thus getting what she asked for, which made her embarrassed eventually to the point she decided to see how other matches go, such as that of Lester and Randy, who were fighting against Irene and Priscilla, or rather Irene and her grabby sheath. Seeing that Randy was sneaking his way to destroy Priscilla's badge, Irene paralyzed him and made sure she pacified Lester, before proceeding to apply too much pressure on Randy that he was rendered unconscious. In response, Lester attacked Irene with everything he got, and he could have defeated her had Irene not been able to actually repel it. As such, she decided to pull out the vampire in her to absorb power from Priscilla. With that, Irene was able to bring all of her might against Lester, where she didn't only make him lose his orge, but outright forced him to surrender. From his own venue, Ayato witnessed this show of force in utter disbelief. Despite that, he still managed to make it to the finals, and Claudia was more than eager to congratulate her handsome young man by rubbing herself against him. Unfortunately for her, her quality time with Ayato will have to wait, as Ayato got alerted by Kieran to the news that she lost track of Seiya. Although Claudia was disappointed, she couldn't bear seeing Ayato being apologetic, so she decided to let it slide, just this once, since she can't afford to let someone as talented as Seiya get lost. Amidst his search for that American young spirit, Ayato ran into Priscilla, who in turn tried to escape from some thugs. Left with no other options, Ayato took the girl with him to the top of a building, where they were off the eyes of these thugs. In fact, Priscilla found herself being attacked by these casino boys who fought with her elder sister a few days ago. Although she called her older sister for help, Ayato was a little faster to come to the rescue. Despite that, his good endeavor got him in deep water with Irene, who just arrived and assumed that Ayato was the threat that her sister was talking about. And not even Priscilla telling her that Ayato is the good guy in the story could change Irene's mind. Or so Ayato thought, because Priscilla's approach to her sister with an even firmer tone made Irene snap back to reality and promise not to harm Ayato in any way, shape, or form. Things became crystal clear when Ayato revealed to her his reasoning for being here in the first place, which made Irene want to pay him for the good deed he did for her sister by inviting him to watch the final match. Only then Ayato realized that Irene and Priscilla are his and Alexia opponents in the finals. That evening, Irene rushed to Dirk's office, guns blazing, as his men attacked Priscilla, which was against the contract that Irene signed with Dirk. For his part, Dirk justified it by saying that not all of his men found themselves entitled to oblige to this order, which is why such a thing took place. As for the lack of guards, Dirk didn't care about placing guards to protect a regenerative like Priscilla. Hearing this, Irene was on the verge giving that dork an early ticket to retire from life altogether herself, had it not been for the fact that Dirk was able to pull his shield just in time to save himself. Irene only left after learning that those guards, who are referred to as cats, cannot afford to show themselves, and that Ayato had butted in before they could even react, before assuring her that he won't get himself involved in her duel or its fathermath. Now with Irene out of the picture, Dirk asked Corona to do a reading. Once she informed him that she saw Irene and her sister winning, Dirk asked her to bring him the vice chairman before proceeding to make a call. Elsewhere, Alexia was left appalled by Ayato agreeing to visit Irene in her sister's place, but since she realized that she must get used to Ayato doing Ayato things at this point, she decided to join him in his endeavor. For her part, Priscilla was welcoming for both Ayato and Alexia. Irene, however, wasn't as eager to welcome her guests, especially Alexia. After a brief moment of dissing one another, Priscilla brought up dinner, which eased off the tensions between the two as Priscilla's cooking rules. When conversation turned to be around the ways that Irene is making money through, Priscilla took her leave, and Irene revealed that for some reasons she ended up borrowing a huge sum of money from Dirk, to which she's paying little by little. Unfortunately for her, she got robbed of the opportunity of entering Festas, and even winning in this Festa won't get her the chance to pay her debt. Instead, Irene is obliged to participate in this Festa in order to destroy Ayato. It was not clear for her why Dirk is so terrified of Sir Vestra, but apparently he witnessed someone else wielding Sir Vestra some time ago. Ayato instantly realized that Dirk was referring to his sister, but despite how vague the information was, he remained thankful to Irene. Once this conversation got concluded, Priscilla arrived with another yummy dish, leaving Irene ecstatic. Once the guests were out, Priscilla revealed that as much as she wants to be useful for her sister's sake, she's also increasingly worried about her wielding her Orge Lux, since it gets her to become increasingly ferocious. Although the duo made no comments to Priselia on that regard, Alexia insisted that Ayato doesn't get a soft spot for Irene during the finals, as she made sure she reminds him of his and her ultimate goals that they're fighting for. Now that the two parted ways, Ayato still had some questions that remain unanswered. As such, he decided to call Claudia to meet at her apartment. As he got inside the apartment, Ayato tried to wake Claudia up, only for her to wake him up in her sleep. This attack persisted for a while, until Ayato somehow managed to get her to actually wake up. Before Ayato could get an answer about what's wrong with her, Claudia made him make a vow to enter next year's Grips Festa as a teammate of hers. As for her own issue, Claudia has to pay the price of experiencing her ultimate demise every time she falls asleep, which is something she went through over 12 times up until now. I'll spare you the gruesome details of these dreams, but no one that dared to wield it could keep it for more than 3 days until she decided to do so. Naturally, Claudia had her own goals that made her decide to wield it, albeit she still wants to keep that reason for herself. Ayato didn't want to be nosy about that, since he wanted to learn more about Grabby Sheath. Claudia revealed that every Orge Lux has its own personality. Sylvestra, for example, has a good one, although slightly preserved. Pandora, on the other hand, is the worst of all for what it's causing Claudia so far, but Grabby Sheath tends to be the most dangerous of all, and its danger comes from Orge Lux's tendency of trying to force its wielder to be transformed into what could fit their best interest, such as the changes that are noticeable on Irene, for example. Hearing this, Ayato got the answer he's looking for, and now it's about time for him to leave, and Claudia's insistence on having him spend the night with her wouldn't make him change his mind for the love of God.
It should have been me, not him! It's not fair!
That night, the finalists had their own concerns that they would see them solve by emerging victorious tomorrow. For Irene and Priselia in particular, their backstory could only be described as tragic, as Priselia found herself severely injured after she got caught in the crossfire of two warring factions. Fortunately for her, she made it out alive and managed to make a full recovery, but the surgery she had required a lot of money, which her parents could never afford unless they sell her. Frustrated by this turn of events, as well as her lack of power, Irene took her sister with her and ran away. The two remained fugitives until they ran across Dirk, who handed Grabby Sheath to Irene. Realizing that she passed the compatibility test, he gave her the offer to ask whatever she desires. By the time Irene woke up, her match was drawing near, so she prepared herself to get there by proceeding with feeding her Grabby Sheath's hunger for power while promising Priselia that everything will be fine. Ayato and Alexia were also preparing themselves mentally for this final match, as they were aware of the strength that Irene possesses. For that reason, Ayato had a plan of his own that he whispered to Alexia. On their way to the arena, Alexia reminded Ayato that she needs to win this tournament by all means necessary, and if Ayato's plan could get her to that end, then so be it. Once both teams were done with mentally preparing themselves, they arrived at the arena, where the crowds were excited to witness a show of might from both Sadauken and LeWolf's finalists, especially after the three Orge Luxes unlocked their weapons. Although Irene kept up with Ayato and Alexia's coordinated attacks, she realized that that doesn't mean that she's invincible with such odds stacked against her. As such, she decided to step up her game. Ayato managed to react well to Irene's skills, but so was she in repelling Alexia's fire bombardment. As she further absorbed more energy from Priselia, Ayato and Alexia took notice that they don't have much time left. They have to act now if they want to win. Alexia did her part in setting the stage for Ayato to attack, who surprised Irene that he wasn't going after her, but rather after taking down the Grabby Sheath itself. In response, Irene decided to go after Sylvestra by further intensifying her attacks, only to be surprised that Ayato repelled the brunt of it, before proceeding to attack the Grabby Sheath once more. Irene was now stuck on the defensive, especially after realizing that Alexia got her trapped, as she tried to break through it, only to realize that that trap was a decoy that got her stuck into Alexia's full might. Despite that, Irene managed to absorb the ferocious attack with her own set of skills. As Priselia approached her sister to check on her, Ayato felt something ominous, as Irene was now fully consumed by the darkness of the Grabby Sheath. Despite the intensity of its gravity, Ayato managed to get close enough to get Irene to let go of Priselia, before losing control of herself once again. Just as the situation was about to become even bleaker, Ayato sensed that Sylvestra was trying to talk to him, which made him unleash its full potential to nullify the effect that Grabby Sheath was spreading over the arena, before taking it off of Irene's hands and destroying it altogether, thus getting the victory that he and Alexia were looking for. Although the crowds erupted in excitement and Claudia was ecstatic with this turn of events, the LeWolf's dork was indifferent to the outcome of the battle. However, he took notice of the curse laid on Ayato, which made him reconsider his priorities again, which involved dealing with Irene. The aftermath of this match reached Shinlu from the Jai Long Academy, Ernest from Galahadworth, Camilla and Ernesta from Alekan, and most importantly, Sylvia from Queenvale, who collectively began to consider how they can exploit this apparent weakness that Ayato has. Elsewhere, Priselia woke up to learn about hers and her sister's loss, as well as Ayato destroying Grabby Shave, which was slightly amusing for her. Although Irene won't be punished for the Orge's destruction, she was disappointed yet willing to accept whatever aftermath she'll face for being unable to pay her debt. Despite that, Priselia revealed that she had finally made up her mind that she does not want to be protected by Irene, but she wants to become strong enough to fight by her side, if not stronger than Irene herself, much to Irene's delight. Ayato, on the other hand, turned out that he won't be able to move properly for the foreseeable future. However, he was still determined that he'll stand by Alexia's side no matter what, only for Alexia to promise him to have his back as well. Before the two could enjoy a serene moment to enjoy being people of culture, Saya, Claudia, and Kieran arrived to check on the lad, who were eager to show their concern by getting him too close to a variety of mountains and hills. Although everyone seemed to be looking forward to having a brighter future, Meidiath was underground, standing in front of the bloody glasses of the deceased Haruka, whom he eliminated with his own hands, and now he's contemplating his next move and his plans. That concludes the anime recap. As always, if you enjoyed, let me know down below and I'm out.